رضوان الله علیه هرچه فریاد دارید بر سر آمریکا بزنید.
Iran calling for death to America, stagflation and rising interest rates. It's really the worst of the 70s all over again. Now, I want to make a joke about the 70s calling and wanting their foreign policy back, but that reminds me too much about Obama's own snafu from the 2012 presidential debate, so I'll refrain. But if you need a reminder, here you go.
Governor Romney, I'm glad that you recognize that al-Qaeda is a threat, because a few months ago, when you were asked what's the biggest geopolitical threat facing America, you said Russia. Not al-Qaeda, you said Russia. In the 1980s are now calling to ask for their foreign policy back because, the Cold War has been over for 20 years.
He really thought he did something there. I mean, awkward, right, in light of recent developments, because then Obama and Hillary proceeded to use the intervening decade to poison relations so much between the U.S. and Russia in order to score political points at home against Trump, instead of finding off-ramps to the roiling conflict brewing in Eastern Europe for these last few years, that now we're looking down the barrel at possible great power war. And that's not only the only nuclear threat we face, as the UN nuclear watchdog, the International Atomic Energy Agency, now says a second Iranian plant is now enriching uranium to 60% in Fordo. That is just one technical step away from 90%, which experts warn is weapons grade, not nuclear power grade. So going back to that clip we kicked off the night with, that was Iranian Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei leading the chants in a recent state televised speech after he mocked Biden for being a poor, demented man after turning 80 years old this past Sunday. Joining us now to discuss all this and more is Matthew Brodsky, Senior Fellow with the Gold Institute for International Strategy. Thanks for being here tonight, Matthew.
Great to be with you.
So it's not a good sign to see the leader of the top terror state in the world renewing calls of death to America while ridiculing our own leaders being demented and basically unable to do anything to stop them. So what are your thoughts on this situation?
Well, I mean, look, this is, as you point out, since the 1979 revolution in Iran, this has been one of the basic pillars of the revolution. America, big Satan, so death to America, and Israel is little Satan, so death to Israel. This is the common chant that they do. It's interesting. I noted from watching the video, as translated from memory, that the notes that Khomeini was using are actually a little bit less of a font, I suppose, than what Biden uses. But clearly, he's bagging on the president. The bottom line is his economy is doing very bad. We're not anywhere close to having a nuclear deal, despite the best wishes of the Biden administration. And we could be making things a lot harder on the economy, on the regime, especially while people are in the streets protesting the regime and wanting to get toward a revolution.
And there's a lot of talk earlier this year when it seemed like there might be a nuclear deal, one that was cinched by the Biden administration. There's a talk of a lot of different sanctions where Iran would get a lot more money once again. Even there was talk, remember, of the IRGC being delisted as a terror group. Thankfully, these things didn't happen. But I mean, who knows what kind of promises are still being made behind closed doors, because this week we saw the U.S. ambassador to Israel saying that nothing's off the table, that they still really want to get a deal done with Iran. Of course, we know Israel's no fan of that, the original JCPOA deal, no fans of renewed talks. But I mean, how crazy is that the Biden administration is fighting so hard for this deal when it seems Iran, they could kind of care less on this?
So, right, to put that in context, right, the administration came in, the Biden administration, promising a longer and stronger deal. And what they've been peddling ever since is a shorter and far weaker deal. It was around 150 billion, which is what Iran was given from a financial windfall from the original nuclear agreement in 2015. This one projects to give 275 billion in just the first year. Projections are up to a trillion by the year 2030, and that includes all the oil that they would be able to sell and the weapons that they would be able to sell, which they're already getting into with Russia. So the deal itself is very bad. What the interview with our ambassador to Israel, Tom Nides, really reveals is that we don't have a plan B. we were unable, this administration, offering as many carrots as they could, was unable to get to a nuclear agreement with Iran. And that was wholly separate from the issue of attacking and killing a woman, Asla, for showing her hair, which has touched off all of these protests. So instead of coalescing into an actual policy that says, you know what, the deal's a bad idea, it's never going to happen, and it turns out that since this is a enemy regime against the United States, and they make sure we know that all the time, that we then help the protesters more, that we put more sanctions on. We could be sanctioning the leader, Khamenei. We could be sanctioning him and doing more to his IRGC leaders, to Raisi, the president. There's far more that we can do. And it's like, as Tom Knight says, nothing is off the table, which means we're leaving many doors open. For as much as the Trump administration was putting on maximum economic pressure, there were hawks like me and others who were saying, why not dump the whole tranche of sanctions, do the whole thing, really put your boot on them right now instead of allowing room to ratchet it up. Right now, we've left so much room, and as the AP reported earlier, up to 60% enrichment. The more enrichment, the higher the number you get, the easier it is. So we're not dealing with a lot of time for Iran to break out and have a nuclear weapon, and that would be a regional game changer.
That would be, and that's what I want to ask you. Do you think it's no coincidence that we're starting to see, even more rapid enrichment of uranium at the same time that these Iran nuclear deal talks that have tied up the U.S. for so many months this year, now that it seems that it's, kind of dwindling, that it's kind of waning?
Well, I mean, I think Iran wants to get a nuclear weapon no matter what. It is certainly gauging what the response is, and it's essentially crickets, right? It's the United States having to work with our European allies who really have not been willing to work with us on a set of penalties if Iran cheats from the previous deal that we left, much less to come up with that kind of arrangement going forward. So unfortunately, until this administration realizes that the only deal with Iran, with the regime that would work, is one where they cannot enrich any uranium at all on their soil. Otherwise, any deal relies on Russia to guarantee the deal and to deal with the excess uranium from Iran. So we have Iran and Russia working together, Iranian missiles that they've been using in Syria and throughout the Middle East to attack Israel, Iraq, the US, Saudi Arabia. These are the missiles now and the drones that they're selling and operating with Russia against Ukraine. It makes no sense to be working with two bad actors who are aligned against us. It should be really simple. Like a child would be able to figure out, these two people don't like me, I'll go play elsewhere, or come up with a plan. But we have yet to do that.
No, we have. And then last minute here, I want to ask you, as you are bringing up with these protests that we've seen ongoing, do you think that that has actually weakened the regime in Tehran? I know 2019 there were protests and you had as many as 1,000 protesters killed. Remember, we saw military guys going out there and spraying the crowds. They brought out tanks. Now we're still seeing, a mostly even women's-led march happening this year. Do you think it has maybe weakened the regime somewhat?
I think it's weakened the regime somewhat. It's certainly weakened the workforce. And look, I mean, I really wish that they could overthrow their government. I think there's an unfortunate reality that happens when you break down norms within the international system, right? And a lot of those disappeared since the Arab Spring, right? We thought one couldn't use chemical weapons. That was a cause for us to invade Iraq in 2003. Well, Assad did that, and there was no problem with that happening. Iran sent in all of these forces into Syria to brutally crush the uprising, with Russia operating as the Air Force. They have the blueprint on how to crush dissent. So it would have to be even more widespread, I'm afraid. I mean, I'm on the side, as I'm sure most Americans are, with the Iranian people. But the unfortunate level of brutality that the regime is able to unleash on its people is fairly breathtaking. So it'd be hard to say we're about to turn a corner.
Well, Matthew, I appreciate your analysis. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you.